One of the defining features of my youth was this unshakable assumption that the Bible belonged to us, to my family. Not officially, not in so many words, but in practice. We were the ones who took it seriously. We were the ones who read it closely, who built our lives around it, who were willing to follow it wherever it led, no matter the cost. And with that assumption came a kind of dismissal of everyone else. The idea that people outside our circle might genuinely care about Scripture or understand it in any meaningful way was laughable at best. Looking back, that position seems absurd, the kind of belief that can only be maintained when you're ignorant of your own ignorance. We had a very limited window into other people's lives, and the Bible is one of the most widely read, most argued over, most culturally embedded texts in the world. It has shaped entire civilizations. It lives in churches and courtrooms, in literature and politics, in everyday conversation. It was and is, by any measure, massively important to many people far beyond the walls of our tiny community. And yet, that wasn't how we saw it. So whenever I'd hear an outsider use Bible references, I would wonder, does this person actually know the story behind what they're saying? Often, the answer was no, because so much of the Bible is deeply seeped into our culture and our way of thinking about so many things, and into the way that we talk. When we hear about the forbidden fruit, we don't need to picture Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, let alone contemplate the mysteries of free will and original sin, because what we mean is something we know we shouldn't want, but do. We get that meaning without effort. Or when someone talks about seeing the writing on the wall, we definitely don't think about King Belshazzar's feast or how shocked he was when, as you can read in the book of Daniel, a disembodied hand mysteriously writes a message of doom on his wall. We don't need that context to recognize the meaning, which is that something is about to end, and not well. Today, I'm going to share the story of one of the most commonly used biblical shorthands of all time. David and Goliath.
President Volodymyr Zelensky, who is leading a defiant nation in this David and Goliath battle.
Despite its military might, the global Goliath, Russia, meeting its modern-day David.
We have elderly Ukrainian women making Molotov cocktails in their basement. If that's not a David-Goliath story, I don't know what is.
When you hear that a contest or a game or some other face-off was a real David and Goliath situation,
this is the NFL's David. Incredible! Versus the NFL's Goliath. You believe in miracles? Yes!
you likely know exactly what that means. The long shot team that pulls off the upset.
The United States hockey team, the most improbable circumstance you could ever have imagined before these Olympics started. The final score, the USA 4, the Soviet Union 3.
The little guy with the audacity to take on the big corporation. The scrappy nation that fights off an empire. In some ways, David and Goliath is the meme of all memes. We reach for it almost without thinking. But the story itself is so much more than a meme for the underdog. That story after a short break. And now, a word from a friend of our show, Waking Up. I don't know what the word meditation makes you think of, but personally, it wasn't something I was ever interested in. And for years, I pretty actively avoided it. I thought it was kinda woo, and I just didn't believe the hype. But then my friend, Sam Harris, the philosopher and neuroscientist, made an app called Waking Up.
What makes life meaningful?
And it changed my mind.
Meditation teaches you that it's not really a matter of what you do with your time. The experience of meaning, the feeling of connection, the sense of depth depends much more on the quality of your attention.
The app happened to launch right before the birth of my first child, and I was feeling strained and unfocused, to put it mildly. My mind was never still, continuously racing from my anxieties to my anticipations to all the things I had to get done in a day. And it felt like I had lost the ability to just be present in my own life. And so, with some skepticism intact, I downloaded the app and gave it a try.
This is your life, the only one you've got, and you will never get this moment back again.
In the absolute chaos of life with a newborn, when I felt like I barely had time to breathe, I would turn on a 10-minute guided meditation as a way of not escaping my circumstances, but quieting all of the anxieties I had around this brand new little life. And I can tell you that the deepest breaths I took in those days were in my sessions with Waking Up.
You've got this one opportunity to fall in love with existence. So why not relax and enjoy your life? Really relax.
In the years since then, Waking Up has become part of my routine, especially in the most challenging times of my life. And the team behind it has added a lot of these new features that make it much more than just a meditation app. There are features like moments.
The whole point of life is not to arrive, but to begin again.
Which are these short daily reflections that give me an excuse for a pause in the middle of my day. Moments that redirect my attention and let me choose, on purpose, how I am framing the hours in front of me. There are also meditations that my friends love, like guided sleep meditations, which you can put on to help you drift off at night. Meditations for when you're feeling anxious, and even lectures from scientists and philosophers and other interesting thinkers. They talk about practical ideas like resilience and the importance of embracing discomfort. Ideas that, if you're listening to this show, you're probably already curious about. So if you're even a little interested, I really recommend giving it a try. And, forgive me the pun if you can, waking up with me by visiting longview.report/wakingup or by clicking the link in the show notes. I hope it's as helpful for you as it's been for me. The story of David and Goliath comes from the book of Samuel, which is shortly after the book of Judges and the events from our last episode. And at long last, after descending into the chaos described in stories like the Levite's concubine, Israel has a king and is united as a kingdom. A few interesting things to note here. First is that kings were having a bit of a moment around this point in history. The Israelites weren't the only ones going from disparate tribes to kingdoms. And the king they end up with, whose name is Saul, he is of the tribe of Benjamin, which is the tribe that almost got completely wiped out in the last episode. Anyway, as the story goes, God gives Israel a king. But this is still a new and somewhat fragile kingdom. And they're still surrounded by enemies, including, most notably, the infamous Philistines, who are a seafaring people from lands to the west, along the Mediterranean coast. And importantly to the Israelites, they're polytheists. They worship many gods. The conflict between Israel and the Philistines isn't a single invasion so much as an ongoing struggle that goes on for decades, a steady grinding back and forth between these two neighboring powers. This is where the story unfolds, in a moment when the two sides are locked in a standoff. And the setting is dramatic. It's a battle in the mountains. Israel's army is positioned up on one ridge, the Philistines up on another, and there's a wide valley stretched out between them, a kind of natural stage for what's about to happen. And what's about to happen is that, to quote the Bible, there went out a champion out of the camp of the Philistines named Goliath of Gath. This champion descends into the valley to issue a challenge to the armies of Israel. He cries out to them, taunting them, and he is enormous and terrifying. My old King James Bible says that his height was 6 cubits and a span, something like 9 feet tall. And this giant of a man has a helmet of brass upon his head, body armor that weighs something like 125 pounds, brass armor on his legs, and he's armed with this massive spear, tipped with 600 shekels of iron, so like 15 pounds at the head of the spear alone. Now, this is the early Iron Age, and not everyone has these iron weapons. And the Philistines have a real advantage here. So Goliath ventures forth from the camp of the Philistines with all of this superior military gear. And with his sheer size, he is a spectacle of force. And he's not calling out for a battle between armies, but for someone to come out and fight him, man to man. "Choose you a man," he says, "and let him come down to me. If he be able to fight with me and to kill me, then will we be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then shall ye be our servants and serve us." And when King Saul and all his army hear this challenge, they are dismayed and greatly afraid. No one dares to fight him. So for 40 days, Goliath repeats this challenge, these taunts, and he gets 40 days of silence in response. The entire army of Israel is terrified, and even Saul, this warrior king, famous for being head and shoulders taller than any man in Israel, he's there cowering too, day after day. Seeing this giant before him, he does nothing. Now, while all of this is going on, miles away from all the drama and terror, there is a shepherd boy named David who is out tending his father's flock of sheep. David is young and, allegedly, very handsome. The text actually kind of harps upon this detail of how good-looking David is. He's described as comely and of a beautiful countenance and goodly to look to. He's the youngest of 8 brothers, and the oldest 3 of them are with King Saul at the front. And one day, David's father loads him up with food, grain and bread and cheeses, and sends him to check on his brothers at battle. So David gets up early in the morning and does as he's told. He arrives at the camp just as the soldiers are preparing to fight, facing each other across the valley, army against army. And David, seeing this, runs into the ranks to find his brothers. And while he's talking with them, Goliath struts down into that valley. Just as he's done so many other times, he repeats his challenge. And when the men of Israel see him, to a man, they turn and run. But David is appalled. He says, "What shall be done to the man that killeth this Philistine, and taketh away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God?" But when his oldest brother hears David talking this way, he is pissed. He comes over to David and starts dressing him down for speaking up. His brother asks David, "Why are you even here?" He says, "I know thy pride and the naughtiness of thine heart. You just came to see the battle." But David responds, "What have I now done? Is there not a cause?" And David keeps speaking out to the other soldiers in the same way, speaking up against this Philistine, Goliath, seeming to try to stir up courage in this place where abject fear had taken hold. And these frightened soldiers are intrigued by this brave little shepherd. They ask him, "Do you know what the king will do for the man who defeats Goliath? The king will enrich him with great riches and will even give him his daughter to marry." Pretty quickly, word makes it back to King Saul about this ruddy kid going around talking shit, and Saul sends for him. So young David, who I always imagine in his shepherd's tunic, maybe with a little rope around his waist for a belt, comes before King Saul, cloaked in his armor. This warrior who has himself refused to answer the challenge. And it's the kid who says, "Let no man's heart fail because of Goliath. I will go and fight with this Philistine." Saul answers, "No, you can't go up against this Philistine," he says, "for thou art but a youth, and he a man of war from his youth." Yet David refuses to back down. He says to his king, "Yes, I'm no soldier, I'm a shepherd, but I have fought before." David tells Saul a story about the day that a lion and a bear came and stole a lamb out of his flock. And David hunted them down and fought them and rescued the lamb out of the lion's mouth. And when the lion arose against me, David says, I caught him by his beard and smote him and slew him. David declares, the Lord that delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear, he will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine. So Saul relents. Go, he says, and the Lord be with thee. But before he lets David go on his way, he offers him his sword and his armor. But when David puts it on, it's heavy and unfamiliar. And he tells Saul, I can't go with these. I haven't proved them, haven't tested them. So he takes them off. Instead, David takes with him only what he knows, his own staff, his own sling, and his own little shepherd's bag, which he fills with 5 smooth stones that he chooses from a nearby brook. And he walks down into the valley. Goliath sees David approaching, and he seems almost amused at first. The giant moves toward him with that huge iron spear, and he clocks David, who's coming toward him without armor, without a sword, a young man who is but a youth and ruddy and of a fair countenance. And when Goliath sees this whole picture, he disdains David. He calls out, Am I a dog that you're coming out to me with a staff instead of a sword? Goliath curses David by his gods and says, Come to me, and I will give thy flesh unto the fowls of the air and unto the beasts of the field. But David answers, You come to me with a sword and with a spear and with a shield. But I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. This day will the Lord deliver thee into my hand, and I will smite thee and take thine head from thee, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. And without hesitation, David starts running right at his enemy. And as he runs, he reaches into his bag, pulls out a stone, puts it into his sling, winds up, and lets it fly. Before Goliath can do anything to stop it, the stone flies through the air and sinks directly into his forehead. The giant is stopped in his tracks, and he falls, face first, into the dust. And in a cinematic flourish, one that's often left out of the children's storybooks, David runs over to the dead body of this giant. He stands on his body. He takes the Philistine's own sword and cuts off his head. In this moment, it's as if a spell has been broken. When the Philistines see that their champion is dead, the entire army turns and flees, while the Israelites, who had stood fearful for 40 days, they find their courage all at once and pursue the Philistines and slaughter them. All the while, standing back, watching all of this unfold, is King Saul, who says to the head of his army, "Whose son is this youth?" But no one can tell him. However, this is an origin story, and before long, the whole nation would know his name. And of course, all these thousands of years later, so do we.
So many legal battles against corporations. These David and Goliath scenarios, somebody has to fight for the little guy.
Despite its military might, the global Goliath, Russia, meeting its modern-day David.
David and Goliath has become a shorthand for not underestimating an opponent or yourself just because one appears to be smaller or weaker or lacking in some seemingly essential competitive edge. But at its core, it's a parable of human courage. What strikes me now, reading it again, is the way that fear spreads through Israel's army, how each day it washes over them again, paralyzing them, diminishing them, solidifying them in their inaction, until someone shows up with this audacious, you might even say ludicrous, courage. And courage, I believe, is absolutely worth celebrating. It's worth valuing. It's worth our admiration. It's among the best traits in the best of us. Stories like this that seek to instill the sacredness of courage are definitely something we as a society still need. It's something I want to pass on to my little ones, something that I believe the world is often in short supply of. But it's also complicated. It's no surprise that my family loved the story. It was emblematic of exactly how we saw ourselves. A tiny church, exalted to victory again and again over every giant that stood against us. The people, the politicians, the courts, the culture. Every opposing force was cast in the role of Goliath. We thought we were the ones willing to say, defiantly, even when we were surrounded by crowds that were often violent, at times thousands strong, what everyone else was too cowardly to say. And while I'm appalled by that message now, I can still see that there's something to that posture, actually. There is admirable bravery in being willing to stand up and say publicly, unmasked and in the real world, at great personal cost, what you believe to be true. Even when you know that people don't want to hear it. Even when you know that they will mock and dismiss and resist, even attack you. In our case, though, moral courage was paired with something that I no longer value, moral certainty. After I abandoned that certainty, though, I faced a question. How do we embrace the bedrock value of a David-like courage, the courage to stand up in the face of danger, the courage to oppose a gathering mob, while still balancing that courage against the temptation to fall back into a close-minded certainty, to avoid thinking that I am the one who knows the truth in a den of liars, that I alone, my team only, can see in a world of the blind. I do not want to be a wishy-washy, intellectually anxious coward who allows the giant's terror and the fears of those around me to put me in the army that flees and hides from the Philistine. But how do I summon that kind of courage again, knowing that I've used it before in ways that I now regret? How do I navigate that tension and help my children do the same? I'm not sure exactly, but I'm also grateful for a different sort of courage that I had to embrace as I lost my certainty. The courage to admit when I'm wrong. And that happens to be the theme of the story that we'll share next time. Of course, if you don't want to wait until next week, you can hear that story and the rest of this first season of our show right now by subscribing to Longview. You can find out how and join our conversation by going to bookkeeper.show, where we welcome your thoughts and good faith debates and criticisms and anything else you have to say. You can also share those by sending us a voice memo to hello@longview.report. Thank you to everyone who's been sharing the show and giving us nice reviews online. We appreciate you, and we will see you again soon.